Okay, today is the Thursday Collective, the much anticipated Thursday Collective with, of course, the Three Musketeers plus one. James Valiant, my favorite prosecutor, Jack Schumann, one of my favorite writers. One of my favorite writers, I said, Paul, because my other favorite writer is you. And today we're going to talk about various things like we did last time, but not the same topics, just different ones. And hopefully it'll lead us into all kinds of crazy areas that'll get us into all kinds of trouble. But before we do that, I think James Valiant has a little announcement or something to read. So James, I'm going to give you the floor and then we're going to start our topic exchanges.
Well, today is actually a very special day. This is our first sponsored Daily Objective, our first sponsored collective meeting. And that means that we are taking, yes, friends, we will never say no to cold hard cash. We are taking money for this episode. And if you want to be a sponsor, please do contact Rosie Ginsburg of the Ayn Rand Center UK. The Southern California Objectivist Meetup Group is sponsoring today's episode. Today's episode is kindly brought to you by the Southern California Objectivist Meetup Group. It's a large group for fans of objectivism and Ayn Rand located in Southern California. The whole Southern California area, San Diego, Orange County, Los Angeles County, and related areas. If you're interested in attending their next event and meeting other objectivists in Southern California, please head over to their meetup page to register. And that link will be in the show notes and posted in the chat. So thank you very much, Southern California Objectivist Meetup Group, for your support and your sponsorship. I may actually attend the next meeting, so there's that. I scare people away or what?
We just learned that my daughter just committed to UCSB, so I may be down in SoCal more than normal. I may try and force her to go to one of these meetings as well. So that's very good news. I hope that they're around in Santa Barbara.
I'm surprised that any objectivists still live in Southern California, let alone California itself. It seems like they're all migrating to Austin, Texas, which seems to be the gulch of the United States. Maybe I'm wrong. Paul, are you still in Southern California?
They tell me that that's where I am. Yes.
Doesn't resemble the Southern California of old, though.
Yeah, witness protection has there's things I can't talk about.
I just want
to. All of my friends have moved to Texas or Florida. Not all, obviously. I have a small, precious handful who are holdouts.
All my exes are in Texas, and that's no joke. I want to clarify something here real quick. This was a super chat from Robert and actually Jonathan giving us a $4.99 hype super chat. Thank you. Robert asked, if the show's sponsored, may we still super chat? Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Even more reason to super chat, I would say.
Exactly.
I would agree. So we have various topics today. I'm assuming that you all came prepared with at least one topic. And Paul, I don't know why you didn't come with your nose and your glasses. I'm
a very serious young man, Mark.
Okay, but I love the irony of a serious topic with that nose. I think we should. Who wants to go first? Do I see any volunteers? I used to ask this in acting class. Who wants to go first? And nobody would raise their hand. And I'd turn around and say, I don't care if you're terrified. You should raise your hand. You have to practice the faculty of courage, my friends. Raise your hand, even if you're terrified. You guys probably aren't terrified, but who wants to go first? Oh, did Jax just volunteer?
I did because I'm always so exhausted. I'm like, no, just let me drink my coffee and wake up. But I got up extra early today so that I could be awake. I don't actually want to spend a whole lot of time on this topic because I have decided that this man is really not worth a lot of my brain power. But it is a story that is in the news and probably worth mentioning a bit. It's about Andrew Tate. All right, how many Tate? Raise your hand. Okay, I'm raising my hand. All right, Andrew Tate is a former ISCA kickboxing champion, and he is not known necessarily for that, though he does talk a lot about his kickboxing career. And he has been in the news lately as a result of being imprisoned in Romania for suspected alleged rape, sex trafficking and starting some kind of a criminal organization. So Andrew Tate is this guy who kind of preaches toxic masculinity. That's like the buzzword that everybody gives to him, is toxic masculinity. He said things like he claims to be the world's first trillionaire, which is absolutely 1,000% false. Studies that various governments have done, the most that they've been able to come up with is his net worth is $50 million. He was in the news famously before he was in prison because he had a raucous back and forth with Greta Thunberg, who and he was, I will say that I thought that this was, he gets one like tick mark for me, because he was talking about all of the cars that he has, all the insane fleet of cars, and what a huge carbon footprint those cars are making, and this was supposed to make Greta die. And then he gets arrested because he was in Romania, and they were saying that one of the tweets that he sent out had the name of the pizza place that he'd ordered pizza from, because he was hiding from the police, and that's how the government found him. The government has since debunked that and said we were on to him already. And I'd like to give police and governments, a little bit more credit than just, a pizza box on Twitter, that must be how we can find him. Anyhow, so he is a man who, and he ran this thing called, still runs it, called Hustler University. His target audience seems to be teenage boys, and younger men. And he runs this thing, Hustler University. It's like a get rich quick thing with cryptocurrency. You pay $50 a month. He's got like 100,000 subscribers. He's also a major social media influencer who is, the kind of stuff that he preaches. I was listening a little bit this morning. He is very much like anti-woke and anti, the world today, the matrix today, the powers that be are basically trying to turn men into beta men. And there is no more masculinity left. Men need to go back to being masculine. Women need to go back to shutting the hell up, like I'm quoting, shutting the hell up, staying at home, making coffee. Also, it's women bear some responsibility for getting raped and being attacked. So that's cool. I didn't realize that. Yeah, he said that. He really said that. And he actually went to Romania, kind of fled the States, went to Romania because he said that they don't charge as heavily for sex crimes there. So the he's messed up in the head. He talks very much about duty and how if you're not doing life right unless you're sacrificing and suffering. And kind of at the end of the day, I've decided that this guy is just a tribalist, in response to more tribalism. And I don't think that he has as big an influence on kids and teenage boys as the media wants to say he does. I don't know. I'm going to stop. What say you people who know about this man?
Paul, what do you think about this man now being turned out of his cage and loosed upon the young men of the world one more time?
So this is what you guys have just said, and what Jax was kind enough to send me an email about earlier, is the extent of my knowledge of this guy. He sounds like a troglodyte. The idea, the audacity of having Hustler University when Larry Flint should own that trademark just really bugs me. Just the thought that Hustler University is a good name suggests really severe branding problems. But the guy sounds like a jerk. That's all I have to say.
I agree with you. James, anything to add?
I think we're looking at a classic package deal false alternative situation here, aren't we? I mean, if we are decrying the decline of masculine virtues, the alternative is not to be a troglodyte in your eloquent description there, Paul. The answer is not to become some savage brute on the other side. Women are to blame for sexual assault because of where they are, how they dress. I mean, setting the clock back a century on these things is not the way to advance virtuous masculinity, it seems to me, but exactly counterproductive. So if this guy claims to be a champion of masculinity, I would put him top of the list as enemies of strong, healthy masculinity.
Unfortunately, I think there are some conservatives who've embraced him. I think the most unfortunate thing about this, aside from his victims and the people who buy his what he's selling, is that we are giving it any airtime at all. This guy deserves to disappear into the vacuum of space, as far as I'm concerned. Were you going to say something, Paul? And I so rudely interrupted.
Yeah, James is totally right about the package deal thing. The notion I think he may be, from what you just told me about the beta men and so on, I think there may be a little bit of truth in that we don't value masculinity in the way that we used to, but the answer is not to put women in the kitchen. It's such a non sequitur. The idea that a masculine man would want a woman in the kitchen is hilarious. I would think a masculine man wants an equal feminine partner, or whatever, gender setup we're talking about. So yeah, it's a complete false alternative.
Clearly, you're not watching religious Twitter as I am. I confronted a religious guy about this very thing. He thinks sex roles are very clear and definitive, where men are the head of the household and women have to obey the head of the household. Now, I never recognized any male-female issues like that in the Fountainhead or Atlas Shrugged, and everybody seemed to get along just fine. Very strong, capable women who could kick ass, very strong, capable masculine men who could kick ass. And it seemed to fit rather nicely. And I think we can have both.
And the women got dressed up and looked beautiful, and so did the men.
Yes, they both had
to be masculine. The women could be feminine. But look at Dominique and Dagny. I mean, there's that wonderful scene where Dominique actually tries to get Howard Rourke to quit being an architect, and she goes, "Oh, we'll take nondescript jobs. We'll go someplace where we can just be nobodies. And believe me, I can cook and clean. I can do the standard, the traditional housewife role. Don't laugh," she says, because the whole idea of an Ayn Rand heroine being a traditional housewife is laughable. We're supposed to laugh at the very notion that a Dominique would just be a stay-at-home mom and that would satisfy her. In the case of Dagny, of course, we're looking at maybe the first fictional portrayal of a woman in all of Western literature who's running heavy industry. What a man of self-esteem is looking for is a strong woman of self-esteem too, with an equal strength of character, if not the same upper body strength. Yeah, that's the way I'd put it.
If these folks in the dominant culture really wanted equality and really wanted to break gender roles as they're passed down to us through tradition, they would be embracing Ayn Rand like there was no tomorrow, but they don't, do they?
But they don't.
All right, so Andrew Tate, we don't care about you. Go away and leave us all alone because you're terrible.
Pretty much.
Who wants to go next? I hope nobody steals my thunder. So maybe I should go next because I got into an argument. Does anybody mind if I go next?
No.
Go for
it. So I got into an argument with a few Twitter socialists. It's not my normal pattern. I don't normally argue with people on Twitter. But this socialist was talking about the way revolutions ought to be done is what's going on in France right now. Now, of course, France has its panties in a wad. The citizens of France have their panties in a wad because the retirement age has been extended a couple of years. Why? Because, of course, the spendthrift politicians probably don't have anything in their coffers, and they need people to work longer in order to, keep that tax base going for that direct consumption tax we call Social Security here. God knows what they call it over there. And the French are throwing a tantrum about it. Now, I said it's a tantrum, and they tried to equate it to the American Revolution. They got a quick lesson in history, I hope, but I know it went over their heads. Folks, when you give your moral agency over to the government, a big part of it, as in your retirement, well, you have now allowed them to control a big part of your life. And when they control it, they say what goes. Sorry, the egg is on your face, French citizens, for allowing that to happen in the first place. I don't think the government should be responsible for anyone's retirement. They should leave you the fuck alone. They should be responsible for the police, the army, the courts. That's it. And otherwise leave you alone. Folks, what say you? Does this series of manifestations, as they would call it in France, have anything to do with the American Revolution? Is there any similarity at all? Please help me.
None, whatever. They are not the victims of any kind of force or violence or a violation of their rights. What they insist on doing is continuing to violate the rights of their fellow French citizens. Now, get this. In the United States, to get full Social Security benefits, it's 66. The age is 66 or 67, depending on when you were born. In the United Kingdom, it's 66. In the European Union, average the retirement age for full benefits is 65. So what President Macron has suggested doing is raising it from 62 to 64.
64,
and we
yeah.
literally have millions. I'm not joking. This makes the 2020 BLM riots in America look like, little, teeny gathering someplace. Millions of people across France. The Bordeaux City Hall was set ablaze. I guess there's more fires going now. The 11th day of shutdown and street violence because they don't want the retirement age lifted from 62 to 64. Now, it's true, President Macron has sort of bypassed the legislature. The Assemblée Nationale has been simply bypassed under Rule 49.3 of the French Constitution, where he can just sort of jam it down everyone's throat without any democratic response. But the point is, obviously, France, which is a far less productive economy, mind you, far lower income per capita than, say, Great Britain, Germany, or the United States, so they can far less afford these ridiculously low retirement ages. But the first point you made is absolutely correct. People always say, well, we expected, it was like a contract. There's no contract. It's a pay-as-you-go system in France, just as it's a pay-as-you-go system. So it's a kind of a Ponzi pyramid scheme, which everyone knows can't last in the long run. And so these people have no right. It's completely subject to changing promises. I mean, since Social Security began in the United States, for example, they've added all this Christmas tree decoration benefits, supplemental things, SSI, all this other stuff is put onto Social Security that had nothing to do with the original promise. There's no connection between what you pay in, what you pay out, and that doesn't even account for the effect of inflation. So, you're subject to the whim of ladies and gentlemen, this is what you get. To the extent you get socialism in these areas, to the extent you regard it as important, your power is being taken away. They take away your money, they take away your power. If an ordinary American just put what was taken away in FICA taxes, the Social Security tax from their incomes, into just an ordinary, broad-based stock index fund, they would way outperform the return on investment. Any ordinary investment, the most conservative investments would way outperform this. Not only is the control taken, you are being screwed.
Yeah, wait, James, people can't do that. You understand? People can't do that. Only the elites understand the longer term picture. The plebes on the ground can't really save up for themselves. Paul, why can't we have our cake and eat it too?
Oh, Mark, if government is not going to set retirement ages, what is government going to do? It's got nothing else on its agenda. It's going to sit there with its knees knocking together in some forlorn schoolyard somewhere. It's not fair. You're taking away from them the one thing that they can do right. And if they're not going to do it, who in God's name can figure out when to retire? This is a difficult problem. It involves numbers. Now, numbers involve counting, and all of this gets very complex. The other thing is, if they're not setting the retirement age and if they're not funding the retirement, who's going to steal money from the citizens? You can't just have private criminals stealing from citizens. We need to federalize this shit. You guys are taking the
they need to be
wrong
trained,
approach.
right?
Yeah.
They need to be trained up.
We need to have symposia of people voting on what is the proper retirement age, and there need to be moral, not consequentialist arguments made, but moral arguments as to why 62 is insane, 64 is correct, or vice versa. You guys are taking this far too lightly.
I agree with you. Jax, are you going to retire?
You know what? I probably, by the time I'm old enough to retire and collect Social Security, there will be no more Social Security left.
True.
because we're going to be going bankrupt. So no, I will just be, I will most likely, but you know what? I would like to choose to work for as long as I possibly can doing what I love to do. And I think this is not the American Revolution that they're talking about. The American Revolution was about freeing themselves from a monarchy and being agents of their own destinies, which I would argue that to an extent, I don't think France has ever been the agent of their own destiny, at least the French people. The type of order, though, that James, you were talking about, that Macron drilled through, I think what's the difference between that and executive order, which I don't necessarily agree with in terms of government, but I think it's, yeah, I mean, Social Security is a joke. Either way, it's ridiculous. The amount of money, like we can't be trusted to save for ourselves. You know what? Even if they had just put aside a 401k for me, a mandatory 401k for me, and it's my money that goes into that, that would be way better than what the Social Security's, and it wouldn't be broke. It wouldn't be bankrupt. So that's my thoughts on it. I think nothing like the American Revolution. Sorry.
No, but I just can't help thinking of the ads that Donald Trump has just taken out against the Governor DeSantis of Florida, where he's complaining that Governor DeSantis was going after retirees and Medicare and all that. He goes, well, I just want you to know that Donald Trump is a big advocate. He might be out there on the streets with those French protesters setting fire to the Bordeaux City Hall because, Donald Trump would not want a single dime cut from any retirements, programs at all. So we know that Trump is on the socialist side. And I hope all of my Republican friends are catching that in these ads. He would be on the side of these, don't mess with our guaranteed government Social Security benefits, folks. And as long as we're in that kind of a condition, it's hopeless. Obviously, the people of France have no sense of cause and effect. They think apparently it grows on trees. You can, print francs and get the same benefits. So long as people, don't have a clear view of cause and effect, it goes back to what John Galt said. It's cause and effect that it really is their enemy. So they're just going to have to learn the hard way about the law of cause and effect. I think
you're talking about a people who took the American Revolution, the American Enlightenment, and then turned it into the Reign of Terror. I think that says just about everything we need. Yeah. Didn't they say Social Security will be completely insolvent by 2040, or is it 2030 now?
It's 20. I was just listening to Yaron, and I thought he said either 2030 or 2035.
Okay, so we're right there now. I mean, this thing that is predicted,
and that's after previous fixes, mind you. Back in the 80s, we had to have the Greenspan Commission, which adjusted things to let it move the shells around a little bit and the deck chairs on the Titanic a little bit so we could extend it. And we've done that a couple of times since, and we're still facing insolvency. It's like built into the system. It is a unfunded pyramid scheme. That's the only way I can describe it.
And if you want to expose a Republican for the statist that they are, just accuse them, as Trump is doing, of wanting to do away with Social Security and watch them stumble over themselves to demonstrate how for this particular program they are. Pretty ugly. Who wants to go next?
I should read some super chats because they're topical. So some from the last topic, just Mary Aline for $1.99 says, cool, thanks, Mary Aline. And Louise for £4, sending us what looks like a cup of coffee, but it could be a cup of Kool-Aid. It looks kind of red. Mary Aline for $1.99. Yeah, but in regards to the Tate topic, what is masculine? Tate doesn't know. 1000% agree. He's a tribalist. He doesn't know what masculine is. Catherine Casio for $1.99. Social Security was supposed to be temporary. That's a good point, right? It was supposed to be temporary, and it has become
weren't they all supposed to be temporary?
Yeah.
Promised it would only be so much. And of course, those promises, whether it was the income tax or whether it was Social Security, whether it was you name the program, it was supposed to be, they promised. That's how they got it through.
And Ashley shrugged for $1.99, says, how about a max age for the government officials? I'm not
12?
sure.
How about 12?
Well,
And then
I
they're
don't
done
think-
being a government official, or that's when they
That's
should
when
be
they're
the
done.
government official.
That's when they're done.
Look, Biden is brain damaged. I mean, the man was never the sharpest tool in the shed, and then he went through that brain surgery, and now he's getting well into his 80s. But there's 80 and then there's 80. Some 85-year-olds I know are sharp as a tack.
Thank you.
Other others are not quite there, and everyone can see that Biden is challenged. And so I don't think we can set an outer limit to age, because I think there are people in their 90s who I would trust way more than I would trust, hale people in their 50s or 60s.
There's definitely a reason they set a lower limit, and that was very wise of them. I think the lowest is 25 for the House of Representatives and 35 for the Senate and for the president, because they understood that the more time you had on this planet, the wiser you were. The more you lived in it and worked in it, the more you understood about it, and the more you could bring to the table as a governor.
It's 25, 30, and 35 for House, Senate,
25, 30, and 35. That's right. 25, 30, and 35. So clearly with the executive being the highest, but I don't think there should be a ceiling, because you could have a man in his 80s who, as you say, is sharp and wise simultaneously.
Whereas look at the newly elected senator from Pennsylvania who had a stroke, and I am not quite sure how well his brain is functioning, and he's significantly younger. So it's really not a function of age.
It seems to be functioning on par with the rest of Congress.
Yes, about the same. Most of them do act like they're in a post-stroke recovery when it comes to their brain.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to make fun of you or your disability. Speedy recovery and healthier.
Yes, absolutely.
Would anybody like to go next?
Well, mine's Tale of Two Cities. Oh, go ahead, Paul.
All right. So when I heard James was going to be on today, I started thinking about crime, because James and crime are linked in my mind.
Oh,
and I was thinking about the justice system. I was thinking that there's obviously a personal component to crime because you have a specific victim, but there's also arguably a social component in terms of the quality of life, the cost to that, the cost of the potential future actions of criminals and their effect on society. So I was thinking, say there's a victim, say that a woman has been raped, and for whatever reason, she does not want to press charges, for whatever reason whatsoever. I don't know whether prosecutors are required or not to not follow through if they have a non-compliant victim. And I'm going to turn that over, obviously, to James when I'm done. But it occurs to me that even if the victim, for whom my concern is primary, even if the victim chooses not to drop charges, it is at least arguable to me that a prosecutor should proceed, assuming that he or she has a provable case.
You mean chooses to drop charges?
The prosecutor should have the ability to proceed against those wishes and to prosecute the case. For example, if you have a rapist who has raped you before and may rape again, the fact that a particular victim doesn't want to press charges doesn't help society in any way possible, because I don't want that person out there raping other people. So I guess I'm more interested in asking the question than giving my answer, but I think my answer would be that in many cases, I would be in favor of the prosecutor continuing to press charges despite the victim's wish otherwise.
And it is the rule that prosecutors can proceed. It is, for example, the people of the United States or the United States government that U.S. attorneys go in and represent, not particular victims. If you're a state prosecutor, I represented the people of the state of California. I was not the personal attorney for a victim. If they wanted to sue somebody, they could get their own lawyer and get money damages or an injunction. I was going to put someone behind bars to protect the community from further acts of coercive violence. Where it would happen most frequently, Paul, is in domestic violence cases. They would very frequently, domestic violence cases took on this fact pattern. A victim calls 911. Help me, help me, help me. He's beating me. Oh my God, I'm afraid for my life. Oh no, he's after me again. You get that 911 call. 2 days later, into my office will come limping in the lady, maybe with a cast, maybe with a broken jaw, and she'll beg me to drop the charges. You don't understand. I need him. I've forgiven him. We've talked, we've spoken. You know, they're always saints afterwards. Oh, they always try to make it up afterwards. But I need him financially, or I need him for the kids, or I need him for the, and they've got all kinds of other practical reasons. And I know why they want to drop charges. But I say, yeah, this time it's a broken jaw. Next time it's going to be the morgue. And they still will say, no, please, Mr. Valiant, I do not want to proceed. And I will still go forward. Why? I've got that 911 tape. So I call the witness, even if she's uncooperative, and I say, is this your voice on the tape, madam? Help, help, help. He's attacking me. He's attacking me. He's attacking me. Juries will understand when I show the medical reports, when I show the police reports and what they saw that night, combined with her statement that night, I can get a conviction beyond a reasonable doubt with a unanimous jury. Now let's transfer it to other kinds of cases. When the victim says they don't want to prosecute, that could be the death of my case. Very frequently in rape cases, it hinges on the credibility of what the victim may say, at least in certain particulars. I have to have other corroborating evidence, that's for sure, just to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. Can't just be a single witness, although a single witness might prove something beyond a reasonable doubt, depending on the context. But in a rape case, if she's not cooperative, she can come on in and say, you know, I was just pissed at him that night. And so I called the cops and I said there was no consent, but there was consent. So I don't care. And it was rough sex. So I don't care what physical findings your nurse found. I don't care what DNA you found, Mr. Valiant. I'm going to change my opinion on whether there was consent. And how can you tell me that it wasn't just that I was pissed off at my partner that night? So she makes it practically impossible for me to go, although technically I have the power to go forward. And there are times when I have gone forward, even when a rape victim, mind you, has said, I don't want to go forward. I've gone forward. Now, I do that very, very rarely, even when I can do that. Why? You are, in effect, traumatizing the victim again. So I have to really believe this dude is, let me put it this way. If this dude is injured or been put away for 30 years on some other crime, I might forget it because I'm not going to put her through that hell. If, on the other hand, this guy's just going to get out and do it, and I know he's going to do it again, I'll at least go for it and try and convict him and get him off the street. And I cannot tell you hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, victims, male and female, of rape and sexual assault have been in my office saying, I don't know if I want to do this. And I'm in there pleading with them to cooperate, assuring them that there will be other victims out there, that this is not a one-off, and that if they can do it this time, they'll do it again, and it won't get lighter, it'll get worse. So yes, technically, public prosecutors represent the people, and they can go forward even if the victim wants to drop charges. But the victim can sure screw up the case in many cases, making it practically impossible if they're willing to change their testimony to get the person off. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. And I'm happy to hear that answer.
And that's generally the way it goes. And we're particularly aggressive when it comes to domestic violence. And when it comes to child abuse, I'm afraid I am universal about this. The child is not in a position to consent or not consent. That's what made it a crime in the first place. Yeah. So if I have proof beyond a reasonable doubt that shows that someone has been physically abusing a child, I'm going to file that case. So this is interesting to me, partly because as an objectivist, when you said we could be re-traumatizing the victim, that is definitely one of the things that occurred to me. And as an objectivist, I'm going, do I have the right to do that? Because they've already been hurt the first time. And I think I don't want to be a utilitarian who says the good of the many outweighs the good of the one who's been raped here because she's the primary victim. But at the same time, I think I would definitely do what it is that you're saying that you're doing. So, related question, if I could, and then I really will shut up. In an objective society, do we have the moral right to subpoena witnesses who do not want to be subpoenaed? Do we have the right to require them morally? In my view, yes. In my view.
And I would say, I hear this all Murray Rothbard makes some arguments against subpoenaing. Anarchists do this all the time.
Oh yeah.
Please clear this up. I hate their arguments, but you'll be able to give us a better one.
Well, look, all you've already given a statement. Otherwise, we wouldn't know to call you as a witness, right? And now you're decided, well, I'm not going to repeat the truth that I've already told law enforcement to a jury when someone's freedom or life is at stake. You have evidence. And all we're asking you for is that evidence for you to repeat the statement that you gave to the police in the first instance. Can you come into court and testify to that? Because otherwise, either some vicious criminal is going to go out there and do it again, or we could lock up an innocent person in some ghastly hellhole for a crime they didn't commit. Now, do you want that on your conscience?
But if you don't abide by a subpoena, don't you go to jail?
Yes, the judge will. Well, it's a case by case basis. It's contempt of court. You violated the judge's order to come into court, to bring the evidence into court, and the judge will assess that on a case by case basis. Ultimately, they can, in theory, put you in jail. Normally, it's only overnight or until you comply, or just a few days. Really, it's a relatively light slap on the wrist. Now, in important cases, if you're holding information, say in a treason case or in a serial murder case, the judge might say, no, wait a minute, we're going to keep you in jail until you testify. Now, think about that, though. We're holding people, giving the judge the discretionary power to punish people simply for not saying what they know. But in effect, that failure to give that information is aiding and abetting the force in the first instance, isn't it? It's not aiding before the fact. So I understand it's a sort of assisting after the fact, but in failing to come in. Now, there are difficult cases. There are witnesses many times who come to me and say, what danger am I in for testifying? What kind of risk do I expose myself to? Does a person have to expose themselves to risk? In all of those kind of cases, I will do my damnedest to protect that witness, to make sure they have security. Maybe they've moved, maybe we've taken the steps to get them protective orders, maybe we've put them in a witness protection program. Ultimately, we have ways of protecting witnesses, especially when it comes to important cases, organized crime cases, cases of serial violence. In those cases, we really do sometimes have to protect the witness in order just to get this evidence that we need to catch this really bad person. But if a person is simply just saying, look, Mr. Valiant, I'm not coming into court. I have, I'd rather walk on the beach that day than go into court and give you vital evidence on a murder or a rape, then no, I'm going to ask the judge to, in fact, I can go ask a cop or the bailiff in the courtroom, could you go out and arrest, the judge has just issued a warrant for the arrest of this person who failed to appear on the subpoena. Could you go out and arrest this person and bring him on in? And all we're going to do is bring them on in, get their testimony, and let them go. So when it's like that, when it's an hour of your time versus some criminal getting off, it seems to me very straightforward. You're in effect becoming part of this criminal getting away with his coercive violence.
Has that convinced you, Paul?
I think it's the perfect consequentialist argument, and I don't mean that as an insult. That's what I would do if I were in James's position. I don't know if it's consistent with my understanding of objectivist ethics, because we're forcing somebody to do something when they themselves didn't commit a crime. They didn't ask for somebody to commit a crime against them or in their presence that gives them the information they now have. So I would feel very bad about forcing them to testify, although of course I want them to. And of course I think they're total jerks if they don't. I would shame them and shun them, but I don't know that I have the right to force them.
I want to jump in real quick. I'd be a bit careful with that. I would like to see more service. If we're talking about, what the prosecutor's office does, I would like to see some kind of a service that actually can help the victim best understand why they should be testifying. And I don't feel like there's enough of that. I have my own experience of, just trying to get a restraining order against somebody that was stalking me in family court. And I was basically cross-examined by the family lawyer, who happened to be an ex-prosecutor. So I got prosecuted but cross-examined by a criminal prosecutor. So by somebody like James. And there was a picture of me at my last kickboxing tournament held up when I was fighting a man that showed me kicking him in the head. And it wasn't the guy that was stalking me, but it was the picture of, do you mean to tell me, Miss Schumann, that you can't handle yourself? And this picture demonstrates exactly why. And guess what? It worked to sway the judge. This wasn't a jury decision, but it helped to work to sway the judge. And that in and of itself was so traumatic to me, a strong, opinionated woman, physically strong, mentally strong, but it, dang near destroyed me. And what I would have wanted, what would have been good would be, for somebody to come up to me like beforehand and afterwards, like, hey, look, this is why it's important for you to tell this story. This is why, the court is going to gaslight you. The lawyer is going to, make it seem like it's all your fault. And this was family court. This is where we're talking like a preponderance of evidence. We're not talking about like 99% criminal court. So I would want to I would want to show a little bit more compassion for the victim who doesn't want to speak up and try. And now I am all for, I do believe morally that you have the right to subpoena them, but I think you also have a responsibility to understand and try and speak to their perspective for why they don't want to do it and try and help them through it.
Let me contrast two cases. There's a person who knows all about the crime because they're a confederate of the criminal, and they withhold their testimony. And we say, well, gosh, you're actually aiding and abetting the criminal. You're actually helping them cover up. You're like the getaway driver or the concealer of evidence, or if you're not coming forward, at what point does your failure to come forward constitute actually helping the criminal cover up his crime? And if it's reasonable, if it's a reasonable step of, the state acting in response to an initiation of force, then aren't you, in simply withholding testimony, just words, mind you, words, aren't you an active supporter of that crime by failing to give the information when that information is vital to punishing aren't you in effect endangering others in the future? Aren't you helping him cover up and get away with his crime just as much as, say, a confederate of his hiding the crime would be? I think there are moral distinctions, and I think in this case it's far less of an assistance to the criminal than, say, being a confederate from the outset. But nonetheless, your failure to merely to provide information is actually helping someone get away with a rights violation and an initiation of force. That just seems to me that you are, although you have not initiated force, you are part of a situation that was force initiation, and you're helping the initiator get away with it by not giving your information. You could have walked away and not said anything from the outset, and there's nothing that Mr. Valiant or any other prosecutor could have done about it. It's only because you did say, hey, no, I saw that happen. And now you say, I don't want to come into court and say, now. Well,
or it could be a case too where somebody else saw something happen to you and they called it in, and you may have never called it in if it were left up to you. But we have a related super chat question from Catherine Cassio for $4.99. Thank you. Isn't putting yourself in danger by testifying is not in your best interest, correct? What do you guys think about that?
Very few witnesses ever get it. Only a very, very small percentage ever get threatened, and an even much smaller percentage of witnesses ever get retaliated against, in fact. So it's a very, 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 very rare occurrence. The recidivism rate of the criminal you're letting get away with it is a very significant thing. He, flip a coin, he's likely to come out and do it again next week when he gets away with it. So I don't mean it to come down to statistics, but there are cases where the witness needs protection, and we have elaborate procedures for protecting witnesses who do need protection. And that is the best we can do. Under those circumstances, though, very frequently the witness does have an option. That is to say, look, this really does depend on me. You're offering me the protection. No. And then, most people do have ordinary freedom. They can just disappear They can, we were talking about evading service in an earlier one. If evading service is easy, you can imagine how easy it is for these people to just vanish from radar's
Just
law,
not show up. Yeah.
their radar screen.
Yeah, a few more super chats. I want to make sure that we also get to, I know that we've got, James, you've got a topic too. Wazart for $5. Thank you very much. Just in support. Mary Aline for $1.99 asked, should jurors be paid? Which I believe they are. Our jurors are paid.
They're paid
just not
barely lunch money.
Yeah.
Maybe one way, maybe the gas one way to the courthouse. It is not true remuneration. Now, jurors, I think, are in a very, very different situation, say, than witnesses. And we do send out court orders. Now, almost never are those court orders. There, I'm letting the secret out of the bag. Get those jury summons.
No, please keep talking. This is very important to me. Keep talking.
Well, they practically never, and I mean, by practically never, I mean like 1 in a million will they ever track down someone who doesn't show up on those summons. It's extremely rare for them to pursue that. But technically, you're getting an order to come down there. And technically, they can pursue legal sanctions if you don't comply with the jury summons. There, I think, is a conceptually different situation than someone who does have material information about a real rights violation. And in that case, I think we should only have voluntary jurors. And if it takes paying them, I'm all in favor of paying them. I have no problem with professional juries. None whatever.
Me neither, but I think you convinced me with the aiding and abetting thing. I think that's a very good argument that in essence, you are aiding and abetting after the fact a criminal who will get away from it, or will get away with their crime if you don't go in and testify, provided there's no real risk to you. It's just
the real danger to you would be greater if the guy got away with it. To you, if this guy got away with it. So I think it's reasonable to use some government force to get important witnesses on important cases into court.
So our Daniel has asked, I heard you can also get out of jury duty by learning about jury nullification, which every time I've showed up for jury duty, and if it's for a criminal case, all I have to tell them is the truth. Yes, I have family in law enforcement, and it's usually okay. No, thank you.
My wife goes in and she says, my husband was a public prosecutor in this county.
You're excused.
She's gone.
I also had a jury case where they asked me my opinion on eminent domain, and I'm like, I'm 1,000% against it, and they're like, okay, you're excused.
Wait, does that mean if my cousin is a sheriff in Northern California, can I get out of jury duty by saying?
Well, you just tell them. They're going to ask you if you have family in law enforcement, and you need to tell them the truth about it. And if it's usually the defense that's going to excuse you. The prosecution will never excuse you, but the defense will.
What's interesting is that both sides, if it's for cause, let's say Jax is the one accused of a crime. I have problem with blonde-haired women who wear glasses. No, I just don't trust them. I just think they're untrustworthy people. I've articulated as a potential juror a for-cause prejudice for which I can be dismissed. And each side has an unlimited number of bumps for jurors who express actual bias like that. Any kind of bias like that, or an inability to follow the law. I asked the juror, now, you may not like this law, and this is the law we're going to be talking about. You like this law? And the person, I hate this law, never. Or take a death penalty case. If a person comes in and says, no, I have a principled objection to the death penalty, and it's a capital case, that's grounds in itself for cause to bump them. And each side has an unlimited number of for cause bumps. But each side also has a specific number of peremptory bumps. I don't have to explain to the judge why I didn't want this person or that person. They're not making eye contact with me. I'm just getting a bad vibe from them. They don't seem to like the cop or the prosecutor or the whole system. And I had very definite rules about jurors that I preferred. I prefer people, for example, as a prosecutor, I need a unified jury to come up with a unanimous verdict and to be able to comfortably make a decision. So employers, supervisors, parents, like more experienced people who are comfortable judging other people are the kind of people I want, people with a stake in the community. business owners, people who have families in the community. They care about crime. And so if all of the things being equal, those are the kind of jurors as a prosecutor I'm looking for. As a defense attorney, you can absolutely tell what kind they're looking for. I don't trust the system. I had a run-in with a cop. My brother was wrongly arrested by cops 10 years ago, ... Have a seat. You're the one the defense wants on the jury.
Yeah.
Make sense?
So yes, it does. So we have another super chat question from Theme Master for 20 pounds. Thank you. Should the sentence of a person who falsely accuses someone of a crime be the same as the sentence of that crime they falsely accused, which the victim would have received if found guilty?
I would say at least as high. At least as high. A minimum of fairness would be that you get the same punishment the other person would have gotten had your lie been believed. But we go up from there, in my view, because you've not only risked that very harm to that person, you've endangered the entire system. You've done far worse than merely hurting this person. And so it seems to me the negotiations on the sentence go up from the minimum that the other guy would have served. Eh?
Did that happen to Jesse Smollett? I don't think it did it?
It did not happen to Jesse Smollett.
Astonishing.
Yeah, astonishing.
It should. And there's a case, we can maybe talk about it at another collective, but there's a case at Stanford University where a woman accused the same man of raping her twice in completely separate scenarios. They reported her as being the way that they reported it was as if she were different women. She finally came out and said that she was lying about all of it, and no consequences as of yet, no legal consequences. Emmanuel, who's been a member for 3 months, I sponsored the show. Come out to our next virtual meetup. Thank you, Emmanuel. Thank you again for sponsoring. And yes, if anybody's in the SoCal area, look up the group. Daniel, did you put a link in the chat to where they could, yes, he did. Daniel said that he did. All right.
Before we get to James's thing, I wanted to say, I think I read in Tom Woods's emails, you take Tom Woods for a grain of salt if you want. He's a libertarian historian who has a podcast that's fairly popular. I believe that the Stanford students who protested that judge recently are getting their heads handed to them by a judge who has written a letter to Stanford, who is now saying that he will encourage them to to not allow these students to enter the bar. And so since the school is not taking punitive action against them, he's going to ruin the reputations and potentially the reputation of Stanford to enter the bar, which I think is a pretty outstanding thing. It's a pretty outstanding way to enforce the concept of freedom of speech, because that's what those people who are now supposed to be representing our constitutional republic in the law were fighting against when they shouted down that judge. Do you have anything to say about that, James, real quick?
Well, I don't believe in occupational licensing laws of any kind, not for medical doctors, not for lawyers, not for anybody. So I would eliminate all occupational licensing as such. But, if you're going to have state bars that control, how many lawyers there can be in the state to artificially jack up the price of legal services, which is really what it's all about, because incompetent lawyers get through all the time and they do not sanction them nearly enough. So I love the idea that if they do have sanctions, obviously this is where they apply. The way I would go about it is I would make it known to all potential employers. What respectable law firm would hire? I would publish their names. Every name of every one of those protesting students should be subject to being published on a list and sent out to every law firm and every government agency out there, saying, if you hire these people, you're doing something very, very wrong. We should ruin their reputations. These young thug protesters who are obviously opposed to hearing any kind of opinion against that doesn't go with their opinion have no business being lawyers. They just don't have the temperament.
They said horrible things to the judge too. I mean, they were holding up signs saying, and they were yelling and shouting, saying that they hope that his daughters get raped. There's no protest in that, saying that he couldn't find a girl's, whatchamacallit, pleasure spot if he tried. I mean, ridiculous. I heard, I'll send you guys an interesting podcast that it was Glenn Lowry and John McWhorter. Glenn Lowry had the two students from Stanford who actually organized the judge to come down. I place a lot of the blame on the dean who came up, the dean of diversity, equity, and inclusion, who came up and gave a 6-minute prepared written speech, knowing that, I mean, so in a way, she was kind of like the Pied Piper of these kids and really enabled this behavior and didn't shut it down.
And
she should be fired.
The sanctions to Stanford Law School should come in. First of all, a dean for equity and inclusion. Okay.
The judge was looking to her to allow for free speech. And she actually said in her prepared speech, maybe we've taken free speech too far. Maybe the juice isn't
that's
worth
the problem in this country. There's too much freedom of opinion. We really just need to tamp that fucker down a little bit, because it can get people can say what they really think, and that could be threatening.
Amen.
Well, see, that's what gives them the right to use force to shut down the speaker that they don't agree with.
Yes.
All you
Yes.
have to do is disagree, and they can use physical force to make you unheard.
Yes, let's continue with that, please. Don't you want a utopia, a docile utopia, my friends? James, we haven't gotten your topic yet, but you have been the star of the show today, answering so many questions about law.
And I was going to go right back to law. The co-founder of Cash App was killed in San Francisco this week.
Stabbed.
It is just the most recent case. Now, the guy had complained about San Francisco going down. I grew up in California. I love San Francisco. It's one of the most beautiful cities in the world. I have so many fond memories from my childhood of this wonderful city, and it has gone straight downhill of late. And here you've got the co-founder of Cash App, who's left, complained about San Francisco, left. He's back simply for business purposes, and he gets killed there.
Randomly, it was a random stabbing too, just from crime in general.
People were around, did nothing, saw it, heard him cry out, and it was hours before anyone got to him.
That's
from what I understand.
Unbelievable. And I have to say, frightening if somebody's attacking you with a knife, and frightening if you walk into that situation. And I frankly don't blame anybody for not getting involved in something like that. If you don't know, even if you know what you're doing, you're going to get really hurt.
The guy was into MMA too. Mixed martial arts. He was actually, a friend of his actually said that he was a really gentle guy who could have defended himself. All this other stuff about it. He was just viciously, randomly sucker stabbed, from what I can gather. So
knife attacks, even if you're ready for it, are an extremely difficult thing to defend against. None of the things they normally show you in self-defense class will work. Just telling you right off the bat, if you've taken knife self-defense classes, that won't work. Because that's not the way people attack you.
If you want to know how bad a knife attack is, one of the drills that we had to do in class was one of you has a permanent marker, and the other person is supposed to your permanent marker is your knife, and you would wear a shirt and pants that you don't mind getting marked up, but in trying to disarm them of the knife, how many marks do you get on yourself? Those are stabbings.
Yeah, you will get cut, you will get stabbed, even if you're extremely proficient at it. That's just the nature of things. So if somebody walked up on that without a gun, I would never blame them for not wanting to get involved. Calling the police, but running.
I'm certainly back now.
You will die.
Then I would go, once it was done, I would go and help them. I would try to.
But all you have to do is watch real knife attacks, and you can find them on video, and they are terrifying blitz attacks where somebody is attacking you hard. Look, Ron Goldman apparently was a martial artist as well, but when he got pushed into a corner by a over the hill professional football player with a knife, he was done. There's a really hard thing to get out of, even if
those long 2-pronged barbecue forks. I've handled assault cases where people came up just from behind on a much bigger, stronger person who they believed themselves was armed, came up and stabbed him in the side, nearly punctured a lung, nearly killed the person. And there was just no way this person could have defended themselves. Stabbings are so easy to get away with. I don't care what your training is. You're absolutely correct. I can, San Francisco's going to hell in a handbasket. It's becoming a sewer, thanks to Gavin Newsom, of course. And then you've got what's going on in Chicago. They've just reelected, or not reelected the same person, but reelected a leftist idiot, at least as bad as Lori Lightfoot was, mind you. They had a choice. It was a close election. Obviously, the Democrat primary decides who gets to be the mayor of Chicago, but there was a relatively sane candidate on crime versus a complete lunatic, even worse than Lori Lightfoot, and that lunatic won by 2 percentage points and looks to be the next mayor of Chicago. Now, San Francisco and Chicago are not, now get this, their violent crime rates are going up and disturbingly so, but they're not the most violent places in America. Places like St. Louis and New Orleans and Baltimore still have the top spots in the most violent places in America. And just to put it in context, it's not as bad as it was in the 70s and 80s. It's true, crime back then was still worse worse than it is today, but we are quickly headed back. And what caused the crime to get better? We had objective laws. We had determinate sentencing. We had tough sentences on violent crimes. We began to turn it around. I remember back around 1990, Giuliani gets elected mayor of New York. The laws in California and New York and the feds tighten up on sentences. But what they did at the same time was tighten up on minimum sentences for nonviolent drug offenses. So there was this weird paradox where people would be thrown away into prison for 20 years for a minor non-violent drug offense. In effect, though, it caused crime to go down. And
but also wasn't it, James, wasn't it the broken windows policing idea, the idea that if you're hopping a turnstile in the subway, this is the beginning of a process of criminality and you nip it right there in the bud and it stops them?
There's two things. The visible awareness that the cop is out there and doing it, and even a graffiti or broken window case. If they're following up on those, then surely they're going to follow up on the theft or the assault or the rape case. That's the psychological condition. But more than that, law enforcement needs the tools. And a lot of those tools have been taken away now with the new bail rules in New York, for example, or with the way that the LA DA is simply not prosecuting crimes. The California Penal Code, there's sections of it that read like this: the prosecution, when they have these facts, shall do this. And if that is found to be true by the jury, the judge shall do that. Now, those things I didn't take as options as a prosecutor. I'm getting my marching orders from the people of the state of California. I didn't have any discretion there. The LA DA believes he does, and he's ignoring whole sections, allegations, personal use of a gun allegation in a crime. He's not filing those, even though those are mandatory under California law to file. He's ignoring the laws of the state of California. So in places like New York and LA, the DAs they've either changed the laws, gotten them changed, or they've imposed new policies that allow violent criminals, mind you, to get out of jail overnight practically, to do some of their armed robbery or rape.
I think violent criminals now are rejoicing because, they've been the victim of prosecution. They should really be happy that the prosecutors are teaming up with them to help re-victimize them or unvictimize them.
Jax, it's about time. And they're not only are they doing that, which praise Jesus, they're doing that, they're also disarming the citizens. And what's fantastic, James, you could correct me if I'm wrong. If one of those redundant recidivist criminals breaks into my home and I have a gun and I shoot him and injure him, God forbid, I'm the guy who might go to jail, not him.
Yeah.
We have multiple cases of just that, where the store owner or the homeowner has been acting in perfect self-defense. Some stranger comes in, some armed stranger at night comes into your home or your business, they shoot back. Or someone is engaged in a theft in your store. You push back, you get your gun and you shoot. The guy's already armed and you get arrested. Absolute madness. absolute madness. Any sense of objective justice, especially in this area of self-defense, has been completely lost in certain jurisdictions. And again, foremost among these are New York and Los Angeles.
Paul, I got to say, you could write a better comedy, but you'd be hard pressed to.
Yeah, it's impossible to satirize what's going on.
It's crazy. Jax, you have some super chats, right?
I do. We've got a couple more super chats. I will say I'm going to save, obviously, my second topic was going to be right in the San Francisco field, James. So I'll save that for next time. But that means you have to join next time, though, because it was it's something that you'll be able to speak to as well. Okay, so Equal to Reality, who's been a member for 11 months. Yay, thank you. Will we ever get an in-person Thursday collective with We the Four Musketeers? Does in-person mean we have to all be in the same place at the same time?
At that
Live?
person's house.
Or in front of an audience is what you're talking about. Clarify Equal to Reality.
Party at Paul's.
Party at
Paul's.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
it.
I'm gonna be in Santa Barbara next week. You guys are all SoCal, at least you for the time being, Mark. So I guess I'd have to come down your way.
I'm in
We
Pittsburgh.
could get Jax, if we could
Well,
get
now
you
you
down here and at a time when Mark is here, we might actually do it all in the same time in the same place.
We could be able to all do that at once. The world might explode, though. You never know.
Although I think, that's a condition under which
I think we're like the POTUS and VPOTUS. We're not all supposed to be in the same place at the same time. I don't know. Jason Adams, matters pertaining to Objectivist for $20. Thank you. Good super chats today, guys. What are your thoughts, especially James, on the Afro Man rapper case where he's being sued by cops for using their images from his camera in music videos during a warrant execution where nothing was found? You can talk about this next week. I know nothing about this. I'll do a bit of research and look at it.
Yeah,
but
I have to do some research myself on this, but cops, in my view, are absolutely wrong whenever they try and stop people, especially bystanders, from using their phones and filming things. What are they hiding? What the hell are they hiding? They are working for us, getting paid with our tax dollars, mind you, enforcing our laws. And if they should, in fact, I would want body cams on all the cops. And secondly, anytime a cop says to someone standing over there just taking a picture, don't take a picture, he has no such authority to do that. Now, don't fight with a cop in the streets. Don't do that. That's stupid. You're going to lose, generally speaking. On the other hand, that cop has absolutely no right to tell you to stop taking video if you're taking a video of something in a public place. Anybody can take a video of something that's going on in the public streets at any time. Now, using that for commercial purposes, obviously you'd have to get releases and so forth. But if you're just out there videotaping the event, you have an absolute right.
Well, he's saying that they used his images, the cops' images, in a music video. So we'll have to look at the context.
Yeah, I want to do the research because you can't use someone's image for commercial. If they're using a cop's face for commercial purposes. Now, if that's an interesting question, and I want to do some legal research.
Yeah, we'll do some
purposes. You could just
to reality. If you want to put in like a link in the chat to, no, not Equal to Reality. Sorry, Jason Adams. My bad. If you want to put in a link in the chat to maybe some links that are news articles.
That's a fascinating legal question.
And then our last super chat, Equal to Reality for £2. Time to get out Judge Dredd. Yes, in the wake of all this insane crime. Judge Dredd, Dirty Harry, the Enforcer, bring them all back. Yes. Yeah, bring them all back. So
a little word, Charles Bronson and Death Wish. I'm not quite sure I'd tell people to go out and do the Death Wish thing, but Dirty Harry, absolutely. We got to have Dirty Harrys out there.
Yeah, you feel lucky, punk. All right. So what's our next upcoming show at 10 o'clock p.m. UK time is Life on Earth with the wonderful Robert Nasir. Guys, I took over the hosting from you, Mark. I don't know what came over me. I'll just let you close it out.
Well, you were doing just fine. You could close it out, but guys, it's been another stimulating conversation. We went way over time because it was so stimulating. And I think our audience was stimulated as well. So let's throw this one in the dustbin of history and look forward to next Thursday, where we could stimulate one another copious amounts.
In person.
Possibly in person, stimulating one another in person.
I just have to say, I look forward to another session of mutual stimulation.
Yes, folks. So this has been the Daily Objective, the Thursday Collective, brought to you by the Ayn Rand Center UK. And I will remind you, always check your premises. Peace.